Right before your life changes completely, you get one clear look at the truth. It doesn't last long, a few seconds, maybe a few days, and then the window closes again as if it were never open. Carl Jung believed that what you do inside that narrow window decides the entire shape of what comes next. Most people miss it, not because they're careless, but because it arrives disguised as something ordinary, a quiet Tuesday, a comment from a stranger that lands too hard, a moment standing in your own kitchen where, for no reason you can name, you suddenly see your whole life laid out in front of you with a clarity that feels almost unbearable. And then, the fog rolls back in, and you go back to loading the dishwasher, and you tell yourself it was nothing. Jung spent his life studying that exact moment. He came to believe it was one of the most important events in a person's psychological existence, and one of the most consistently ignored. He watched patient after patient describe some fleeting instant of recognition that had visited them months or years before they arrived at his door, a glimpse they had dismissed, argued away, or buried under the noise of their routine. And almost always, that glimpse had been the psyche's way of announcing that a transformation was coming. Today, I'm going to walk you through what Jung discovered about this window, why it opens, why it stays open for such a painfully short time, what the mind is actually trying to show you when the fog parts, and why the people who learn to recognize that moment when it comes are the ones whose lives crack open into something they could never have planned. Because if you're feeling a strange pull toward this right now, some sense that you're standing near a door you can't quite see, Jung would tell you that's not an accident. That's the window beginning to open. Let me start with what this glimpse actually is, because it's easy to romanticize and even easier to misunderstand. Jung believed the human psyche is far larger than the small, lit room of everyday awareness. Most of who you are lives outside that room, in the vast territory he called the unconscious. And the unconscious isn't passive, it watches. It gathers everything your conscious mind is too busy or too frightened to process, and it holds all of it. The truths you've been avoiding, the desires you've buried, the direction your life actually wants to move in versus the direction you forced it to go. For most of your life, there's a wall between those two rooms. The conscious mind stays busy with its schedules and its worries, and the deeper self stays quiet, waiting. But every so often, under specific conditions, the wall thins. The fog that normally sits between you and your own depths parts for a moment, and through that opening, you get a single, clear view of your own life from a vantage point you almost never have access to. That's the moment the title is pointing at, the one you'll only see once, at least in this particular form. And the reason it feels so strange when it comes is that you're suddenly seeing your life the way the deeper part of you has always seen it, without the flattering stories, without the excuses, without the comfortable blur that lets you keep going. Think about how it actually feels when it happens. You're doing something completely mundane, driving home, sitting in a meeting, watching someone you love talk about their day, and out of nowhere, a thought arrives that isn't like your usual thoughts. It's colder, cleaner. It says something like, "This isn't the life you're supposed to be living," or "You already know what you have to do," or sometimes just a single devastating word, "enough." There's no argument attached to it, no lengthy reasoning. It comes as a whole, complete perception, the way you'd recognize a face. And for a few seconds, you feel the ground shift under you, because some part of you knows, without any doubt, that what you just saw is true. Then the reaction sets in. And this is where Jung's insight becomes so important, because he understood exactly what happens next in almost everyone. The conscious mind panics. It doesn't want what it just saw. That clarity threatens everything. The marriage you've organized your identity around, the career you spent 15 years building, the version of yourself you present to everyone who knows you. So the mind does what it's designed to do. It closes the window. It floods the moment with reasons. You're just tired. You're being dramatic. Everyone feels this way sometimes. This is a phase. It'll pass. Get back to work. And it does pass. That's the tragedy Jung kept witnessing. The fog rolls back in, thicker than before, and within a day or two the whole thing feels like a mood you had once. You can barely remember the force of it. The window closes, and the life it was trying to interrupt continues exactly as it was. Jung had a specific way of understanding why this glimpse arrives when it does. He noticed that these moments tend to cluster around a very particular period in a person's life. A period where, on the surface, everything looks stable, but underneath, something has quietly finished. A structure that used to organize your whole existence has run its course. The energy has drained out of it, and the deeper self, sensing that the old container is empty, sends up a signal. He compared the psyche to a system that's always trying to move toward wholeness, toward becoming the full person you actually are, rather than the partial, edited version you've been performing to survive. He called this movement individuation, and he believed it wasn't optional. Your deeper self will keep pushing you toward it whether you cooperate or not. The glimpse is one of the gentler ways it announces itself, a knock on the door before the door gets kicked in. Because here's what Jung observed happens to people who ignore the knock. The signal doesn't just go away. It goes quiet for a while, and then it comes back louder. What arrived first as a fleeting moment of clarity returns later as restlessness, then as a low, persistent unhappiness you can't explain. Then, if you keep refusing it, as the kind of crisis that tears the whole structure down whether you're ready or not. The illness, the affair that blows up the marriage, the breakdown in the parking lot at 45. The unconscious, denied its quiet request, eventually stops asking politely. This is why he treated that first glimpse with such seriousness. It's the least painful invitation you will ever receive to change your life. Every version that comes after it costs more. Now you might be wondering why the window has to close at all. Why the psyche gives you this crystalline moment of truth and then snatches it back. And Jung's answer to this is subtle and worth sitting with. The clarity has to be brief because you're not yet strong enough to hold it. If that vision of your real life stayed fully open, if you had to look, without relief, at every way you've betrayed yourself and every change that honesty would require, it would overwhelm the conscious mind completely. The psyche protects you from a truth you're not ready to carry. It shows you the whole landscape in a single flash, the way lightning shows you a dark field, and then it lets the darkness return so you can absorb what you saw at a survivable pace. So the closing of the window isn't a punishment, it's a mercy, and also a test. Because what you do with the memory of that flash is what determines everything. Most people let the memory dissolve. A few hold on to it. And the ones who hold on to it, who write it down, or keep turning it over, or simply refuse to pretend they didn't see what they saw, become the ones the transformation can actually work through. Let me describe what that first glimpse tends to reveal, because it's remarkably consistent from person to person, and you may recognize your own version in it. The most common thing people see in that moment is the gap. The distance between the life they're living and the life that would actually be theirs. For years, you've kept that gap comfortably out of focus because looking at it directly is painful. But when the fog parts, you see it in full. You see how much of your day is spent performing, how many of your relationships run on a version of you that isn't real, how the thing you tell everyone you want isn't the thing you actually want at all. You see, with terrible precision, the exact size of the compromise you've been living inside. Others see a single relationship with sudden, brutal clarity. The person they've been making excuses for. The dynamic they've been calling love that is really something closer to a cage. In that flash, all the rationalizations fall away at once, and they see the thing exactly as it is, without the story that's been keeping them in it. And some people see the opposite. They see something they're meant to move toward rather than away from. A buried talent. A direction they abandoned decades ago because it wasn't practical. A version of themselves they were too afraid to become. The window opens, and for a moment they feel the full presence of the person they could have been, and still could be. And the grief and the longing of that recognition is almost too much to bear. Whatever the specific content, the underlying message is always the same. This is real, and what you've been living is not. And the reason it's so hard to hold is that it demands a response. You can't unsee it, not really, even after the fog returns. Some part of you knows the window opened. Some part of you carries the memory of what was on the other side. Jung noticed something else about these moments that I think is one of his most quietly radical ideas. He said that when the window opens, the outer world often seems to cooperate with it. Things start to line up in ways that feel too pointed to be random. The day after your glimpse, you overhear a conversation that speaks directly to it. A book falls into your hands. A stranger says the exact sentence you needed to hear. He called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, and he believed it was the inner and outer worlds briefly moving in step, as if reality itself were underlining the message. He wasn't being mystical about it, at least not in the way people assume. He was pointing at something real that most of us have experienced and then dismissed. When you're near one of these threshold moments, you become porous. You start noticing things you'd normally filter out, and those things start arranging themselves into a pattern that seems to point somewhere. The signal isn't only coming from inside you, it's coming from the way you and the world briefly recognize each other. If any of this is landing on you as more than an idea, if you're feeling that particular tightness in the chest that comes when something is being described that you've actually lived, then you might be closer to your own window than you realize. This is exactly the terrain our guide, True Self-Discovery, was built for. It's 24 reflection exercises drawn from Jung's work, made for the person standing right at the edge of one of these openings, unsure whether to look through it or turn away. It won't force the window open. It'll help you stay by it long enough to see what's actually there. The link is just below this video. But stay with me, because the most important part is still ahead. What actually happens after the window closes. Here's what Jung understood that almost nobody talks about. The window closing isn't the end of the process, it's the beginning of the hardest part. Because after you've had the glimpse, you're no longer fully able to live inside the old story. The fog comes back, yes, but it's never quite as thick again. A thin thread of the truth stays with you, and it makes the ordinary life you used to accept without question start to feel slightly false, slightly off, like a photograph that's just barely out of focus. Most people find this unbearable and don't understand why. They caught one glimpse of their real life, dismissed it, went back to normal, and now normal doesn't fit the way it used to. They feel a restlessness they can't source. They snap at people for no reason. They feel a strange grief in the middle of good days. What they're actually experiencing is the pressure of a truth they saw and then tried to unsee. The psyche doesn't let you fully forget. It keeps the memory alive, quietly, waiting for you to be ready. And this is the point where the two roads separate. Jung watched people take one or the other over and over across his career, and the difference between them shaped the entire second half of their lives. The first road is the one most people take. They treat the discomfort as a problem to be managed. They distract themselves harder. They fill the restlessness with busyness, with consumption, with new projects that keep the surface occupied. They double down on the very structure the glimpse was warning them about, because rebuilding the wall feels safer than looking through the window again. And for a while it works. The unease quiets. But it's a quiet built on suppression, and suppression costs energy, and the energy runs out eventually. These are the people who arrive at some later breaking point genuinely bewildered, asking how their life fell apart when they did everything right. They didn't do everything right. They ignored the one moment that was trying to save them the trouble. The second road is harder at first and immeasurably better later. On this road, the person doesn't rush to close the window. They let the discomfort stay. They resist the urge to explain the glimpse away, and instead they turn toward it. They ask what it was showing them. They tolerate not knowing the answer right away. They live for a while in that uncomfortable in-between space where the old life no longer convinces them and the new one hasn't arrived yet. Jung considered this ability, the ability to stay in the tension without collapsing it, one of the rarest and most valuable capacities a person can develop. Everything in you wants resolution. The mind hates an open question. It wants to either dismiss the glimpse entirely or leap immediately into some dramatic action that resolves the anxiety. Quit the job today. End the relationship tonight. burn it all down so the tension stops. But the premature leap is just another way of closing the window. It swaps the discomfort of not knowing for the false relief of doing something, anything, and the something is usually wrong because it came from panic instead of clarity. What the transformation actually requires is the willingness to hold the question open long enough for the deeper answer to form. To carry the glimpse with you, gently, without forcing it, until it starts to show you not just what's wrong, but what to do. And that takes time. It takes weeks or months of living with a truth you can't yet act on. Most people can't stand it. The ones who can are the ones who come out the other side genuinely changed rather than merely rearranged. Let me make this concrete because I think you'll recognize it. Picture someone, and it could be almost anyone, maybe someone a lot like you, who has built a life that works on paper. The steady work, the long relationship, the home, the routine, the friends who've known them for years. From the outside, it looks settled, complete. And then one evening, standing at the sink, watching the water run over their hands, they're hit by a wave of the strangest feeling, a sense that they are a visitor in their own life, that the person who made all these choices was operating on assumptions they never actually examined, that underneath everything, quietly, for a long time, they'd been waiting for their real life to begin, and it hasn't, and it might not, and the years are moving. It lasts maybe 10 seconds, and then the fear comes, right on schedule, and with it, the flood of reasons. You have a good life. Do you know how many people would want what you have? This is just stress. And they dry their hands and go sit down and turn on the television, and the moment folds itself away. But it doesn't fully disappear. Over the following weeks, they notice they're sleeping worse. They find themselves near tears at odd times. A song, a photo, a certain quality of afternoon light. They start feeling a distance from the people closest to them that they can't explain and feel guilty about. Everyone around them thinks they're fine because they're performing fine. Inside, the thread from that moment at the sink is pulling, steadily, patiently, and they don't understand what's happening to them. Jung would look at this person and see something entirely different from what their family sees. Where the family sees someone becoming difficult or withdrawn, he'd see someone standing right at the threshold of their own becoming. The wave at the sink was the window. The restlessness that followed is the psyche refusing to let the glimpse die. And everything now depends on whether this person turns toward the discomfort or spends the next decade explaining it away. The ones who turn toward it don't usually blow their lives up overnight, by the way. That's the fantasy people have about transformation, and it's mostly wrong. What actually happens is quieter and stranger. They start paying attention. They start noticing which moments in their day feel real and which feel performed. They start telling small truths they used to swallow. They follow faint pulls of curiosity they would have ignored before. And gradually, without any single dramatic decision, the shape of their life begins to reorganize around what's actually true for them, until one day they look up and realize they're living somewhere their old self couldn't even have imagined. That's what Jung meant when he said the glimpse decides everything. Not because it forces an immediate change, but because it plants something. A seed of self-knowledge that, if you protect it instead of trampling it, grows into an entirely different life. There's another dimension to this I want to name, because Jung was insistent about it, and it's easy to skip past. He believed that the reason so many people slam the window shut has less to do with laziness or fear of effort, and more to do with loyalty. Loyalty to the people whose lives are built around the current version of you. When you get that glimpse of your real self, part of what makes it so frightening is the immediate, unspoken awareness of who would be disrupted if you followed it. The partner who fell in love with the person you've been performing. The parents whose approval depends on you staying inside the lines. The whole web of relationships calibrated to the self you're being called to outgrow. So, the choice the window presents isn't only between truth and comfort. It's between your own becoming and the comfort of everyone who's grown accustomed to who you were. And that's a genuinely hard thing, not a trivial one. Jung didn't pretend otherwise. He knew that individuation costs you some relationships, or at least changes them beyond recognition. and that the fear of that loss is one of the main reasons people bury the glimpse and never speak of it again. But he also knew the alternative. A life spent protecting other people's comfort at the cost of your own reality is a slow erasure. You disappear by degrees, so gradually that neither you nor anyone else notices until there's almost nothing left. The window is the psyche's attempt to stop that erasure before it's complete, to remind you in one clean flash that you are still in there, that the real you hasn't died, only gone quiet, and is asking, one more time, gently, to be let out. Here's the part I most want you to hold on to. If you've had one of these moments, the fact that you can still feel it, still remember the shape of it, means the window hasn't fully closed. The invitation is still open. Jung was clear that the psyche is patient, but he was also clear that it isn't infinitely patient. There's a difference between a truth you glimpsed last week and one you glimpsed 20 years ago and have spent 2 decades reinforcing the wall against. The sooner you turn toward it, the softer the whole process is. The longer you wait, the more force the unconscious eventually has to use to get through to you. Which means the most important question isn't whether you've had the glimpse. If you've stayed with me this far, you almost certainly have, or you're standing right at the edge of one. The important question is what you're going to do in the days after, when the clarity fades and the fog starts creeping back, and every practical voice in your head is lining up to tell you it was nothing. That's the crossroads. That's where the whole thing is actually decided. Not in the flash of insight, which arrives on its own and asks nothing of you, but in the quiet hours afterward, when you get to choose whether to protect what you saw or let the world talk you out of it. If you're in exactly that place, carrying a glimpse you're afraid to lose, unsure how to keep it alive without upending everything at once, that's the whole reason true self-discovery exists. The 24 exercises inside are designed to help you stay close to what you saw, to draw it out slowly, in a way you can actually survive, so the window doesn't just close and get plastered over like every other time. It's a way of keeping faith with the part of you that finally spoke up. You'll find it linked right below.